everybody. Just for the sake of getting through this, I will open this up for some Q&A at the very end. But with that said, I want to thank everybody for joining us today. Today, we're going to be talking about OneCloud POTS replacement solutions. There's been, a lot of ups and downs in POTS replacement over the past couple of years since the FCC has greenlight carriers to essentially sunset that technology. So we'll be talking about that. I've got Brian Longwell with us today. He'll talk to us a bit more about it. A little housekeeping real quick that I wanted to cover. We are always innovating and improving our solutions. And just wanted to, talk about a few of them. One of them is we have released Alert Blast V3. Alert Blast V3, if you're not familiar with our Alert Blast product, is a mass notification solution that can allow you to do mass texting, mass phone calls, integrate with overhead paging. It does a ton of different things, but we've done some pretty nice upgrades to the aesthetics and the functionality. If you're an existing user of Alert Blast, we'd love to show you the newer version. And if things like mass notification are important for your organization, definitely reach out. We'd love to show it to you. We're doing some more awesome things with our AI agent. Our AI agent V2 should be coming out in the very near future. And some of the things that are coming along with that will be some added in-call functionality and post-call functionality and a little bit more capabilities in what you could do with that agent. We're currently on Connect version 3.5.3. We will be coming out very soon with version 3.5.4. And with it, you're going to be getting a couple of cool new features, such as having the ability to have sentiment and transcription within Connect. Now, transcription does need to be enabled for that to work. And a few things with some in-call monitoring, such as getting a better idea of the quality of service or, the quality of calls. In the near future, though, we are working on some other really cool things, including the ability to interface maybe with your desk phone using the Connect client. So there's a lot of really cool stuff coming down the pipe. You can always go to any of our OneCloud websites and sign up for our newsletter for important information, or reach out to me directly, and I can get you enrolled in that. So. Moving on from there, as I said, we are talking about the OneCloud POTS replacement solution today. Been lots of changes there, and we are coming up against some deadlines with some large carriers that are going to be kind of speeding up that process a little bit. Quick introduction of myself. My name is Ben Smagus. My role here is onboarding, partner support, product evangelism. I've done some landscaping over the years. I've been with the organization for going on 16 years, and it's been a great experience. I started out on our structured cabling crew. I learned a lot about the physical layer of network communication and how it works. And as we've grown into the cloud, there's been so many changes, and it's been absolutely a great experience for me to learn and grow with OneCloud. Fast growing company, lots of cool technology, always trying to stay on the forefront. And folks like Brian Longwell out there really trying their best to stay on the pulse of the changing technology. But with that said, what is OneCloud? Well, OneCloud is not just a UCaaS provider. Our mission is to build trusted relationships with our customers. One things we've always really focused on and had a lot of pride in is creating tailored solutions for our customers. That means that we try to make our products something that people can embrace and find those solutions that might not be in the marketplace. We do have in-house engineering. We are developing things all the time to make life easier and to improve communication overall. One thing that we try to focus on as well is, when a lot of systems move from on-prem to cloud-based, there were some gaps there. Some of those gaps would have been POTS replacement. Some of those gaps would have been faxing, mass notification as well, like interfacing your communication system with your overhead paging. But we do other things, like we deliver dial tone directly to Microsoft Azure Teams environment. We are one of 49 Microsoft Operator Connect certified partners. And we do things like mobile solutions and more. So we do quite a few different aspects of communications, not just a phone system. We don't just do chat and SMS. We try to help out organizations all the way from that structured cabling up to software solutions that can improve your overall business quality. Today, we're going to be covering a few things. We're going to talk about the pot sunset, what's going on, what are some of the problems that companies are encountering right now with analog lines. We'll talk about from analog to advantage. What are those analog devices, and what can OneCloud do to simplify and bring some to bring some betterment to that the software and solutions that power it. We'll talk about an industry use case. So we'll talk about a real example in which we deployed a very large volume of analog lines. And then we'll talk about from legacy to resilient. So why does it pay off, right? So what's important about it? And then we'll talk a little bit about the hardware. We'll get into transmission technology, how that works, and then we'll open it up for Q&A. Top 3 reasons that you're here today. Understand the change with POTS. POTS is plain old telephone service, traditional old analog lines, and they are being phased out. So we're going to learn why those legacy lines are being phased out. We'll talk about the rising costs, some of the service disruptions that come from that, and the FCC regulations and changes that can impact mission critical or emergency critical infrastructure. We'll discover fast, affordable replacements, so how you can easily swap out those analog lines. It can definitely be a little bit intimidating depending on your environment. So we'll talk about ways that are easy to deploy, certified solutions across all 50 states, starting anywhere from $30 to $50 a line, and can be deployable in minutes, depending on the application. And we'll talk about protecting and future-proof, right? So walk away with ways that to upgrade that outdated analog equipment with services that can help you avoid service gaps, giving you things like monitoring, and better transmission rates. With me today is Mr. Brian Longwell. He is our Director of Engineering. He gets the day-to-day headaches that come with software development companies, and that includes hardware compatibility and a million other things. It's always great to have an idea of what something is, and starting on that idea, but in software, it can be a humongous challenge to take that from an idea and a concept to flesh it out, turn it into something, and then actually have a deliverable result that is deployed to the public. So I commend him and his team for a lot of the hard work that they do. And Brian, you were also kind of critical in the POTS replacement process as well. So if you could you introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about what you do and what you were involved in with the POTS replacement solution for OneCloud.
Thanks, Ben. Like I said, I'm Brian Longwell. I've been with OneCloud now for 9 years. One of our department's key responsibilities is the device management. I'm managing the portfolio of devices we offer. And one of those recent tasks, probably about 2 or 3 years ago, was to find a decent solution for the POTS replacement. A little bit more than a regular ATA, a little more resilient. So here's the solution we've got that Ben's going to show you. As a background, I've been doing this for about 20 years in the telecom business too.
Yeah, you've been around a minute. So as a fellow Bills fan as well, just kind of curious, what are your thoughts on the new stadium and the fact that they don't have a roof on it?
I don't care as long as they win a Super Bowl eventually. Someday.
100% with you on that one. So diving into everything that's going on with it here, a few things that we're dealing with or the challenges that organizations are dealing with is increasing costs, unreliable systems, issues with compliance, and even service disconnects. Increasing costs for not only infrastructure, but the dial tone itself. I know that you've kind of been more on the engineering side and less on the customer-facing side, but I know you've heard some stories and been involved in some larger deployments. What can you tell us about increasing costs and what businesses are seeing right now with analog lines?
It varies, in region. Around here, lines are traditionally $30 to $40 a line, sometimes $50 a line. But now that they're coming out of contract and unregulated pricing's kicking in, really it started about 2 years ago. We're seeing them start to get month-to-month bills for, I saw a run recently for 175 per line. So, it's a huge increase. There's no regulation. They're not, interested in a contract anymore. So you're kind of stuck with it. So you got to come up with an alternative.
And I think you had mentioned that there was somebody you were working with that they had a substantial change in what they were locked in. They were paying a few thousand a month, and then they rolled out of contract because they've been kind of not ignoring it per se, but just didn't really take that step yet.
No,
And then
they were definitely ignoring it. They got notice. They got plenty of notice ahead of time that the contract was going to end and that the contract pricing would no longer be in effect. It essentially took their monthly bill from, I think it was 9,000 to about 49,000. It was a jump from, I think it was $30 a line to about 140 a line, and they had about 300 lines. And they were, by the time they heeded the notice, they only had about a month to switch. That's just not possible. So they're going to be eating a lot of that monthly for a while until they can get the scheduling of the lines replaced. Yeah. So it's
yeah,
going to be a huge. They've been getting the warnings for quite some time and they ignored them, and it's not something to ignore.
yeah, it's definitely going to hit them where it counts for sure. So with that said, they're phasing these lines out, things like that. They're coming out of contract.
Mhm.
Organizations are shutting them off. But in that as well, these carriers aren't putting as much emphasis on maintaining the copper infrastructure any longer that's in the ground, which leads to things like unreliable systems. I saw something not too long ago where the FCC initially required, I think it's 180 days notice to customers, and now as we get closer to those deadlines, we're looking at 90 days. Um, what type of unreliable things can we run into with these lines?
Well, they're just not servicing them because part of the problem with what the FCC did is it released them from liability on these lines essentially. They're not making as much money, so they're less apt to go ahead and service these lines. So if a line goes out, turnaround times on these are sometimes non-existent. Sometimes they'll say, no, you need to switch. We're going to cancel your line, and that leaves you down if you're not prepared for it.
And depending on the facility, let's say we're talking an assisted
Yeah,
living community or something, that could be a little problematic.
yeah, and it's happened with alarm lines. People don't consider that sometimes their fax machine that maybe they don't think they care about it or need it anymore. Well, that line, back in the day up until recently was a backup line for an alarm panel. So now they've disconnected that line or it's gone out of service. It's not being repaired. There's no backup line. Sometimes, like in the case Ben's talking about, there's no primary line either.
Yeah. And primary lines and secondary lines and those things, that ties into things like compliance issues, right? So we've got a lot of different safety regulations across the board.
Mhm.
And when you're trying to source a solution, let's say you've got your back up against the wall and you're trying to figure out what to do for POTS replacement, um, you know, compliance is important. Would just a regular, ATA thrown in there is, or an analog telephony adapter, which kind of gives you dial tone, is that going to meet compliance?
In some cases, it could. Like for a fax machine, it'd be fine. For a phone, it'd be fine. But no, it's never going to meet compliance for a fire. Elevator is another one. I don't know of a municipality that's inspector was going to pass that ever. So no, you're going to need minimum 24-hour backup battery built into it, some sort of a redundant power source. So,
Yeah, and I know, I think we were talking earlier, like, we're in a place called our county is Mecklenburg County, so they do have some pretty strict regulations
mhm.
on what those lines are, and if you're already dealing with unreliable lines and the carrier isn't really supporting them, compliancy isn't even just a hardware based thing anymore. Now you're just dealing with a carrier that, not that they don't care, there's no SLAs on those lines. So if they go down, nobody's rushing out to replace them. So with that, there are also those service disconnects, right? We did talk about the one carrier that they rolled out of contract and went from 2,000, I think you said $49,000 a month, which is substantial. But if you keep ignoring that, they could shut these lines off entirely. And I was reading recently, something with AT&T. AT&T used to be the biggest player in the game. Honestly, if it wasn't for AT&T and a breakup that happened in the early 80s, OneCloud would probably not be here today. AT&T was broken up. Some folks came together and formed what was eventually became OneCloud. But AT&T is still a huge player. And coming June of 2026, AT&T is beginning to shut down their landline centers, where essentially these giant switches that control a lot of these landlines. And we're looking at, just AT&T alone is going to be shutting down about 10% of their footprint. That could be millions of lines. Now, over the, especially the past 2 or 3 years, as the FCC kind of gave the green light on the shutdown of these copper lines, we've seen some rushes to get this changed. It's kind of gone to a lull. But now, especially 26, 27, 28, and I know 2029, most carriers completely want to be out of the game. Do we expect to see, another mad dash there?
I mean, we see a pretty consistent mad dash right now. It'll for sure get worse. The first dash really started when Verizon sold off all their copper infrastructure on the East Coast. I think was first to Frontier, and then Frontier just ended up, turning it all down and not supporting it. So, yeah, it's been going on, but it is definitely getting busier.
Yeah, and that's going to put some stresses on organizations, even like us, for example, to have the bandwidth and time to do these replacements. We get down to the last minute, you got 400 people clamoring, I need a replacement now. we
Run into
could.
hardware supply issues at that point. Yeah.
Oh yeah, 100%, 100%. I mean, I look back to like COVID, and one of the things that people didn't think about back then, is everybody had to go remote, and PBXs weren't 100% remote at that point. And the funniest thing is it was power supplies that powered phones, so you could work from home. It was like hotcakes, man. People were buying them left and right, but it became running into that supply and demand issue, and that was significant. So, a lot of the devices that are out there, there's been quite a few changes. So there's been a lot of devices that may no longer, let's say, alarm lines, fire alarm panels, those things require certain regulations. Other things like fax machines, postage machines, things like that, they're not so critical. But a lot of the devices out there, like fire alarms, you've got panic buttons, you've got security systems, things like area refuge phones. Those ones I always get asked about. I say think like a fire tower. Or somewhere in a very remote destination where people are hiking or something. That's where these go. Also, let's say, remote monitoring stations or things like that. There's a lot of different alarm technology needed. And with the landlines being cut off, it leaves these, kind of at a disadvantage. So with you and some of your experience, I think that you've dealt with some alarms before that were hard to deploy, right? We're running into some issues maybe with um, a new building, perhaps.
Yeah, you're referring to our new building a couple years
Yeah.
ago, but yeah, I mean, one of the biggest problems with alarm panels is they were built to last. So we're seeing panels, running into them now that were put in the late 80s, 90s, and that's the panel in our new building was, I think it was dated to late 80s. And there really was no upgrade option. We brought somebody in, had them look at it, and it was basically a full system swap out. So, obviously we're going to put in our POTS replacement. We were a little skeptical if it was going to work. Those panels are very finicky with the phone lines. They don't use contact ID. They use straight DTMF over audio. So, a lot of issues come into play there. But honestly, we put the box in. We had a little problem at the beginning with voltage. We can adjust it in our device. We adjusted it. And I don't think we've had a single issue since then. And I know we've had a couple of alarms go off. So yeah, it's running really well.
And outside of the fact that finding that right solution that works well and mitigates things like you said, voltage, I think there was a little cost disadvantage if we didn't get that swapped out.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, when we had the technician look at it at minimum, I mean, just for a service call alone, I think we ended up paying about $1,000 for him to come on site just to look at it. And we were, anywhere from 4 to 6 when he was done, depending on how much more needed to be replaced. And then that didn't even cover the cost of the fire communicator, which is a cellular modem that goes onto the fire panel. that you can, usually slap on most panels. But again, this one was so old I couldn't even take that.
That's interesting, especially for the companies that haven't even really taken that step yet, or it could be intimidating, right? Depending on who
Mhm.
you're dealing with, not everybody understands some of this analog stuff, and when you try to source something, those might not be knowledge pieces that people would expect to run into. They might automatically just think, well, I'm gonna have to pay the 6 grand or whatever. So knowing that there's alternatives, especially for this equipment and the legacy equipment that's out there on analog lines, is definitely important. Now, with POTS replacement and OneCloud POTS replacement, we try to deliver a lot of key benefits or advantages. We know that there's some challenges out there. There's a lot of folks that might be dragging their feet. They're intimidated by jumping into something new. They don't know what to do, or maybe they're ignoring it until that big hit occurs, or they go under a new contract or non-contract month to month. From our side, and just to talk to cost savings, we're able to reduce those costs of those analog lines that are now sitting at $175 to $200 a line. I spoke to a partner in California who they had a customer who was paying upwards of $1,200 a month for an analog line. Now, granted, this customer might have lived in a particular neighborhood and was in a particular industry where $1,200 a month wasn't a big deal. But where I'm from, $1,200 is plenty of money. But we can bring those line costs down to $50 a month, and that includes things like the hardware that drives it, and we'll talk about that. LTE data, so you're going to have some redundancy with not only maybe just having a LAN connection, but also having LTE connectivity, battery backup, and things like maintenance, all bundled into one, which I think is really, really, really important, especially from a OpEx perspective, your operational expenditures, knowing that you can reduce that by moving over to a POTS replacement solution, but what's also included in it, right? So maintenance is a big deal. Having the support there when you need it, if there are issues, is always critical. Now, with that, we'd like to bring things like enhanced reliability. So there's a lot of changes to this technology, a lot of advancements, things like dual SIMs or having the ability to have LTE. Can you speak to enhanced reliability and kind of what our solution can bring to that?
Yeah, so one of the things, obviously, you said dual SIM, so we can put two SIM cards in a device. If one SIM completely fails, the other SIM will activate and go live. But aside from that, we have multi-carrier SIMs as well. So what that does is it just allows it's a single SIM card. It picks the tower with the strongest signal to connect to. It may still use the same backbone, AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile, doesn't matter. It'll roam on those towers and give us the most effective connection. Um, Soon coming out of that too, because that is a roaming solution, and you do have lower priority on a tower because you're roaming. There's times if it's very congested that may not be great. We're coming out with a new. It's a dedicated SIM, so it can actually connect straight to the carriers as opposed to having to roam on the carrier. So we'll actually be able to pick the tower and the provider at that point, whether that's Verizon, AT&T, T-Mobile, and I think US Cellular is the fourth.
I mean, that's actually pretty cool. I've done some work in the past with cell boosters and things like that, and that can definitely getting that signal just right, depending on where you're putting that equipment can be fun.
Yeah, and
And
that's. Oh, I'm sorry, Ben.
go no 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 go for it, go for it.
No, I was just gonna say that's a relatively new technology. Before you would need a separate SIM for each tower. So we have finally come across something that does allow us to put all four SIMs on a single physical SIM card.
And that's kind of a testament to technology, right? So like
Hmm.
LTE failover, LTE capabilities, cradle points, all that stuff's been around for a while. That technology just only gets better and better, just like everything else. Now, when it comes to compliance, staying compliant is important. We look at things like code and safety regulations. Now, as I understand it, our solution is deployable in all 50 states and meets all of those code regulations. Is that right?
Yeah, and that's just simply because of what we're doing. We're not touching the fire panel. We never should have to. What we're doing essentially is going back to where Verizon, AT&T, whoever the landline carrier was, we're removing their lines and putting our lines in place. So in most cases, nobody's ever going to ask for any sort of documentation on that because all we're doing is replacing the CP equipment, no different than another carrier coming in. But sometimes they do ask, so we do provide a document that states essentially what I just said, but more legal.
Yeah, yeah, gotcha. Sometimes, you put that piece of hardware in there. There's always that rogue
Mhm.
inspector, and nothing against safety inspectors, right? They're there for a reason, to what they do, but maybe it's something that they're not familiar with, and they just want that documentation for peace of mind. So, it's nice to easily be able to have that available. And the reason I think that's important too is we're not just delivering this to customers, but we have a whole channel partner program as well. So we have folks across the entire country who are dealing with this in different counties and towns and states. So sometimes it's nice for them to have that as well and make sure that it's readily available. Now, as for ease of deployment, this can be an intimidating thing as well, right? Some facilities are huge; they've got tons of analog lines, or maybe it's completely down and they need a replacement. From our device and equipment, tell me about the ease of deployment. Is it something that we can spin up pretty quick?
Yeah, I mean, we can usually have a device set up and ready to go in very short amount of time, couple of hours, and it really comes down to where it's being installed, how it's being installed. And in most cases, if we're going right at the demarc, it's a very simple install. We identify the existing line, disconnect it, plug in the new line. Essentially, as long as we have power and a cellular card in the device, we're good to go.
Gotcha. And for those two that may not know demarc is just essentially traditionally where the analog line would come into your building is called the demarcation point. That's where the CO or your dial tone provider would drop off that line. Everything past that is usually the customer's responsibility. So getting it from there to the equipment, is all things that it could have been a challenge, but we make it as easy as possible. No techs are involved, right? So no $1,000 bill to have a technician come on site. Just having that power. No porting, which I think is also a big one. Again, anytime you change an analog line, sometimes you need to make some adjustments. So I do want to talk quickly about a case study, and Brian, I know that you were heavily involved in this one. We had a large municipality that was struggling with some of its analog infrastructure. One of those areas was some emergency call boxes. Of course, there was issues across the entire municipality, but these were mission critical for them, and they were important. And some of the things that they were running into was the fact that you know, uh, they needed to get a replacement, A, for cost savings, but B, if they couldn't find something that was viable, they're going to run into a scenario where they needed to upgrade the hardware and infrastructure, which is a big capital expenditure for them. We were able to get this deployed for them. I think they started us out with just 30 or 40 lines or something like that, and we were able to knock that out of the park and got some additional lines into that. Can you give me a little detail about that project and maybe some of the things that we ran into that were a bit challenging?
Yeah, so like you said, it was scoped to be a large project. We started off with 30 to 40. The first problem we ran into was there was no allowance for us to put these devices on existing infrastructure. They had to be completely standalone. They couldn't physically or even through a cable touch another piece of equipment inside these boxes. And again, some of them were up and down light rail, some of them were blue light phones. It just varied, but that was one of the first requirements. So the devices had to be 100% cellular, which with these devices was fine. The other thing we ran into was, as we're getting down the line, we're finding, a lot of the emergency phones weren't even working in its current state, whether it was the line was dead from the carrier, I think it was AT&T in this time, or the physical phone was dead, or the fire panel was dead. We're monitoring a bunch of different devices with them in this case. So um, we fix a lot of that, get the new devices in, and now we're actually actively monitoring them for them, right down to the point where we for the emergency phones that are scattered throughout this location, we actually make a phone call to the device. It checks in with us, tells us it answered, and we mark it on a board that it's up. So the customer is well aware of the current status of the devices. And in most cases, we know about the issues before they do. And in a lot of the cases, we have it fixed before they even come to work. That team that monitors them does start off very early in the morning. So they look at the alerts, they head out and troubleshoot. A lot of times it's a bad phone. And we go to their warehouse, we grab a new phone and we replace it.
It's
So again,
awesome.
they usually don't know there's a problem, by the time we've got it fixed.
Yeah, and I mean that mitigates a lot of things, right? So public safety,
Mhm.
risk, ensuring that things are working. And you'd mentioned that this had to be an all cellular environment, and I think the use case there was that this was a like a government network,
Yeah.
and putting our stuff on there was just not an option. So things like having the SIMs that can lock in to specific towers, or having the variety of a multi-carrier SIM, is huge. Now, ultimately, we were able to knock it out of the park for this municipality, starting out with those 30 or 40 lines, scaled to 600 plus lines across the city. We're talking elevator lines, alarm lines, fire panels, remote monitoring stations. One thing I always bring up, and I think I might have already said it, is like pump stations, right? You see these water towers. Most people don't realize that the equipment and the pumps have to be monitored. There's not always a data cable out there or internet that's dropped off just there. So ways that they did that was analog lines, or now having a solution like this saves a lot of that trouble. But we did minimal disruption, no risk, but actually improved the availability of public safety, and ultimately saved them over $500,000 a year, just in carrier costs. And not to even mention the manpower and the expenditure of what the hardware would look like. So it was a big deal. Change was invisible, and it really was easy, and literally no disruptions for them. Now, with that said, you played a critical role in, sourcing the equipment. And for those who have been on this webinar before, you're probably seeing some different graphics. So it's important to kind of catch up to speed, make sure that you're aware. Over the past couple of years, there's been a lot of changes, not only in technology, but supply and demand. That's led to, new technologies coming out, some adjustments into the technology that's out there. So Brian, if you could kind of talk us through this slide a little bit about, what is the hardware, what it does, and what problems or how it solves,
Sure.
maybe some deployments.
Yeah. So, like you said, this does change frequently, and actually, this slide will be outdated here in another 2 months. Um, the box down there at the bottom labeled the PR08 will be replaced with a PR18. That device is actually will have built-in 5G LTE modems. As you can see, this one doesn't even have antennas on it. Technology just wasn't there yet for this device. So, um, one of the most important parts about these boxes, we don't know where they're going to go. So a lot of times, they're going outside, or they're going somewhere that less than ideal temperature conditions that most hardware can't support. So our devices are weather resistant. We can get them weatherproof by putting them in an enclosure, but most importantly, they can take the temperatures of a small space, like up and down the light rail was very hot. Um, and then, obviously we can support anywhere from 1 to 8 devices, just in a single solution. After that, we just keep adding more boxes, which is fine. They're perfectly fine with that. And really, we talked about it earlier, the big requirement is battery backup. That is one thing they're going to want when you hook one of these up to a fire panel. It does need backup battery, secondary power supply. So at minimum, our devices will run at full capacity for around 24 hours, which is the minimum. But typically we've seen with standard usage, that run for about 48 hours. The 2-port will run for well over 48 hours. Um, right now we support 4G, 5G, 4G in the 2-port, 5G in the PR18 that's coming out soon. And one of the cool things about the 2-port is it actually can be powered off a PoE. So we don't need to put this thing where there's a power or an outlet nearby. In a lot of cases, that's very helpful if we need to, especially if we need to get the device closer to a window for a better signal, and there may not be an outlet over there. So as we do is we take a cable from the switch, plug it into the WAN port of the device, and it'll actually draw power from that, and it actually charges the battery too. So when it goes offline, it can still run.
That's pretty awesome. I did want to touch base too on the fact, a lot of these are physical SIMs, but if I understand correctly, we're looking to have some eSIM technology built into these in the very near future.
Yep, both of them will support eSIM. And one thing I did forget to mention is we can add, for the 8 and the 18 coming out, we can also add an external power supply to them as well to increase the runtime.
Gotcha. And for those who may not know, the physical SIM, it's just a little piece of a little chip right, that you put into it, and that's essentially how the device knows to communicate with the cellular tower. And some of those changes is now you can have a virtual SIM. Essentially, it just installs a little bit of a, I would assume, like firmware or flash on the device, and that is what it allows it to communicate with the towers. So, I mean, some pretty cool stuff. Now, before I move on to the transmission piece, really, and kind of close this out, we talked about things like the challenges that we're running into. There are those hardline dates that are out there for those carriers, Frontier, AT&T, that are going to be shutting these lines off. It's important to get out ahead of this, and also understanding that you have the teams that understand how to deploy this stuff. Um, you know, onesie twosie lines, not a big deal, but there are some organizations. I think there's a local church that's not too far away that has a day school, and they have 35 or 40 lines. These need to be mapped out. Need to know what they're connected to, how they're connected to, and some of the other things that we didn't really talk about is that these ports are modifiable. So if a port's connected to alarm line versus it being connected to something that maybe it might be a little bit different, we try to pre-configure the hardware to ensure that it's delivering the best possible connection, that we can, right?
Yes. Yeah. Sorry. Was
No, you're good. You're good. I kind of threw you on that one, but so we understand some of the benefits of what we're trying to bring here as well. So ultimately, though, all of those things really about kind of boil down to transmission technology. When a panel or something needs to make a phone call, what happens, and what are we doing to give it the best possible chance of survival to ensure that it's working correctly for the end users?
Yeah, so this goes into the question you just asked me before. So, most of the time, an alarm panel is going to fail 100% of the time over SIP, over a normal ATA adapter. It's never going to work. So what we do is we actually take that data and run it through our UL listed data center. And what that allows us to do, it allows us to do quite a few things, but one of the key things is we clean up the data as we get it. So if we get fragmented data, we actually are able to piece it back together before sending it off to the alarm company, so they get the most accurate information on the whatever event's been triggered, whether it's a fire panel or even an elevator line. And like Ben said, we have pre-built profiles on these devices for these situations, so we ensure that alarm lines always go through our data center. We ensure that elevator lines are always set to G711, different things like that. And that really goes back to making the installation super easy for anybody who can do it. They just pick the profile and they're done.
Hmm. Yeah, and those things, those are just little nuances I think that are important for businesses and individuals looking for replacements to understand that this isn't a this for that. There's a little bit that goes behind swapping these out. As I mentioned, OneCloud, as equipment moved from on-premise to cloud-based communications, there were some gaps in that technology, and sometimes those gaps aren't easily visible, right? Using the right codecs for a call or something like that, that's not top of mind for a lot of people. But that is the kind of stuff that we try to think about, and you get to try and stay ahead of on a daily basis. So as I said before, I appreciate all the hard work that you put into everything that we're bringing or building out and offering our customers, you and the entire engineering team. So with that said, I try to cut this format down to 30 minutes, keep it a little bit shorter, sweet, to the point. If there's any questions, I would love to go ahead and open this up for questions. At the bottom of your screen, you will see, if you hover over the bottom, a little hand that points up like this. If you want to click that, one of our mods will unmute you, and then just make sure that there's not a line through your microphone, and we'll ask any questions that you have. With that, I'll go ahead and open this up for questions. All right, looks like a pretty quiet group there. Oh, we got Bob. Should be good, Bob, if you want to make sure that you're unmuted. Make sure you click right here. Make sure there's not a line through there.
How's that? Is that better?
That's excellent.
Perfect. So I noticed you said no porting. Well, I guess the first question I wanted to ask, is it certified for use with fax?
Honestly, we can do a fax with it. Is it recommended? No. It's a lot of technology for fax. We have
Sure.
alternative options for faxing, such as email to fax, fax to email. We have a proprietary ATA, but we can also use things like the OBs or the Polycoms. If this sole use case is fax, I wouldn't recommend it, but it would work, yes.
Gotcha. Okay. The and it's a mix. We've got a mix of customers. Some that use they're dedicated. They want their fax machines to work. So we've got some of
Sure.
those. But then we've also got the alarm lines and elevator lines to worry about as well.
Sure.
Another question while I'm there is the RJ45, is that for power only, or do you switch back and forth from cellular to Ethernet?
We would always prefer Ethernet. It's gonna save you a little money in case the device goes over on data. With
Okay.
the whatever the package you get with it, it includes a certain bundle of data. So yeah, I'd always love you to plug it into data whenever you can, and you can actually use the LAN side off of it too to plug something else into it, chain it right off of it. But yes, the device by default prefers a physical connection, but will fail to cellular automatically, and it will fail back when it detects the other connection coming back.
Gotcha. Okay. So that leads into the other question about the pricing. Is it fixed flat rate pricing, or is there usage charges built into that?
That's a Ben
Generally,
question.
yeah. Generally, it's fixed flat rate pricing, but we can talk, especially depending on the deployment and the scale.
Gotcha. Okay. And so I take it it's you package the unit up though and ship it to the customer and they plug it in themselves?
Depends on the deployment. We can certainly do that if they have the capability to do so, or if they need us to source somebody for them. OneCloud's been around for a long time. We actually started out as Telware, and we have, which is still an organization that we're with. It's one of our arms, but we've done deployments across the entire country. So we have contractors or help all around the country that we trust to touch our equipment and install it.
Great. Okay. I'll be quiet now and let someone else answer.
No, man, I love the questions. I really, really appreciate it. I'm happy to have you reach out. And I think I'm not sure how you received the invite, but you're more than happy to reach out to me directly if you have any questions.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Anybody else? All right. Well, with that said, I'll go ahead and close this out. Brian Longwell, thank you so much for your time today. Dude, I know you've been a very, very hectic schedule. As I mentioned, he is the director of engineering. He's handling all those updates that I mentioned there at the very beginning. But at the end of this, very shortly, our awesome marketing team will get a follow-up email for all those that joined with a link to this recording. Outside of that, thanks for joining us today, and I'll see you next time.
Thanks, Ben.
Yep, thank you.